My detached garage has always been my second living room. It's pretty basic. Concrete floor, socket sets lined by size, an old radio that only picks up 2 stations, and a mini fridge full of Dr. Peppers. I spend more time out there than in the house. Sometimes it feels safer surrounded by tools than people. I installed a motion light above the side door last summer after a raccoon decided to treat my trash like an all-you-can-eat buffet. Bright halogen, clean sensor housing, mounted just right so it wouldn't false trigger. I could see it from my kitchen window, my own little security system. 99 nights out of 100, it stayed quiet. Then came that November night. I'd just finished rebuilding an alternator, packed up, and shut off the breaker that powers the garage. Before heading inside, I looked back. Light was off. Everything the way it should be. I poured myself a Coke over ice, let the TV drone in the background, and saw the light flash on through the kitchen window. That kind of thing grabs your eye instantly. White flooding a space that should be black. I went to the window, lifted the blinds, and looked out. The yard glowed like daylight. No movement. No cat. No wind. The oak tree barely stirred. I stood there, waiting for something to justify it. Nothing. After about 30 seconds, the light timed out. I muttered something about the sensor being too sensitive and went back to my drink. 2 minutes later, it flared again. This time I knew I hadn't imagined it. I walked to the laundry room, flipped the breaker off to kill power to the garage. Darkness. Waited. Then switched it back on. Before I'd even dropped my hand, the light came on again. Now, I'm not the kind of guy who jumps to ghosts or nonsense. I fix engines for a living. When something behaves wrong, you test the variables. So, I grabbed my wrench, habit more than weapon, and stepped outside. The night had that metallic quiet you only get near midnight. Nothing but the neighbor's air conditioner down the block. When I reached the garage, I tried the side door. The handle turned, latch pulled back, but the door only moved an inch before stopping dead. It didn't hit wood. It hit something soft with weight, like a shoulder leaning back from the other side. There's no deadbolt on that door. There's no reason it should resist. I pressed again, felt that subtle give, then a definite pushback, the kind of resistance that says someone's holding it. I took one slow step back, then instinct took over. I lifted my boot and kicked the door hard right near the handle. The wood jolted forward with a solid thud, and the door blew open. A man fell backward onto the concrete, catching himself on one arm, eyes wide. He'd been leaning against it, holding it shut. Before I could say a word, another man came from behind me, out of the dark near the fence. He hit me in the shoulder, and I went down hard. For half a second, all I saw were boots and the white glare of the motion light flooding the yard. My brain caught up a beat later. 2 men, both rough, both breathing heavy. Not kids. Not pranksters. I rolled fast, scrambled to my feet, and ran. Didn't think. Just moved. I cut across the short path to the house, slammed the kitchen door behind me, and locked everything. Handle, deadbolt, chain. My hands shook as I backed up toward the counter, grabbing the phone. Through the kitchen window, I could still see one man limp toward the other and help him up. They both looked straight at the house. One of them cupped his hands around his mouth and yelled, "We'll be back! We'll collect on that!" Then they disappeared toward the alley. I stayed by the window, phone pressed to my ear, talking to the dispatcher. She told me to stay put, to keep eyes on the yard if I could. I whispered what I saw. 2 men, one in a dark jacket, one limping, moving west toward the fence. The motion light blinked off, plunging everything into black. Patrol cars arrived in less than 10 minutes, lights sweeping both ends of the alley. I let the first officer in. We went around back together. The side door hung crooked now. one hinge nearly torn. On the concrete, a faint smear of dirt led toward the alley. Someone had fallen hard. The officer crouched, shone his flashlight across the floor. Could have gone bad fast, he said. He checked the roll-up next. The padlock had been flipped through and snapped shut from the outside. He angled the beam low across the metal. The light caught a fresh handprint on the door, bigger than mine, pressed deep in the dust, sliding down as if someone had grabbed for balance. Boot marks overlapped near the threshold. 2 pairs. One tread heavy, one half-dragged. "You sure you didn't know them?" he asked. I shook my head. They searched the alley but found nothing else. Just a scuffed patch of dirt by the fence where someone had climbed over in a hurry. No tools, no ladder, no vehicle. Still, the officer took photos and wrote up the report. After the police left, I sat by the kitchen table with the blinds cracked open, staring at the dark yard where those men had stood. Every few minutes, I thought I saw movement by the fence, but it was just my nerves flicking at shadows. Sleep didn't happen that night. Around 3 a.m., I grabbed a pad of paper and started making a list. Bolt inside door. Move tool chest into house. No more work after 10 p.m. Ask neighbor to watch the alley. By sunrise, I'd already installed the bolt and dragged my tool chest into the dining room. It looked ridiculous next to the table, but it made me feel better, like I'd closed the distance between safe and stupid lucky. I told myself that was the end of it, but fear doesn't clock out that easy. That night, I was in my zone. Headset on, friends yelling about loadouts, space heater buzzing under my desk, parents out for the night. It was the perfect setup. I was 17, bored, and just trying to make it to graduation. Our split-level house in Des Moines was the definition of safe. Quiet street, nosy neighbors, nothing ever happened. The only light in my room came from the monitor and the LEDs on my keyboard. My parents were out celebrating my aunt's birthday. My mom texted me, "Don't stay up too late," which basically meant I know you will anyway. Everything felt comfortably ordinary, until the window went dark for like half a second. Just a tiny shift of shadow across the blinds. I froze, looked at the time, 11:47 p.m., then unmuted my headset. "Probably the cat," I said. Logan laughed. "Since when do you have a cat?" "Since never," I said, acting like it was no big deal. Still, I kept looking back at that inch-wide gap between the blinds. The reflection of the screen made it impossible to see much. Just the faint gray of the snowbank outside and a darker shape near it. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe the streetlight flickering again. Another round started. I leaned back to stretch, and the shadow moved again. This time slower, like someone crouched just outside. I muted chat. The rest of the house felt too still. I waited for a sound, a crunch in the snow, a knock. But there was nothing. I told myself not to look. Curiosity won. I lifted one blind slat with my finger. A man crouched inches from the glass, face partly hidden by a hoodie. His breath fogged the window, and his lips were moving, forming words I couldn't hear. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't frantic. He was talking to me. I didn't scream. I didn't even breathe right away. I just stayed frozen, half bent at the window, staring while my brain tried to process it. The lips kept moving, forming syllables. He looked calm, focused, like he wanted me to read his lips. That thought alone made my chest tighten. I backed away quietly. My headset crackled, Logan shouting something about a revive. And I flinched so hard the chair squeaked. The man stopped moving his lips. Then he turned his head, listening. I slid out of my chair, grabbed my phone, and crouched by the wall. I didn't go near the glass again. I dialed 911. 911, what's your emergency? My voice came out too flat. Someone's outside my window. He's crouched and he's watching me. The dispatcher asked for my address and told me to stay on the line. Can you move away from the window? She said. I whispered, already did. From the corner of my eye, I could still see the faint movement, the rhythm of his head as he breathed, fogging the glass, erasing it, fogging again. He's still there, I said. Are your doors locked? Yes. Stay on the phone with me. Officers are on the way. I edged down the hall, keeping my back to the wall. The floor creaked once. I stopped breathing. The dispatcher kept talking, grounding me with small questions. What color hoodie, what direction he was facing, if I could see his hands. Gloves, I said, both hands on the sill. There was a pause. Stay where you are, she said. Don't try to get a better look. As if I would. Then came the sound I'll never forget, a soft tap on the glass. One fingertip. Then a slow drag, like tracing a line. Not a knock, not aggression. Just communication. He wanted me to react. The dispatcher must have heard something in my silence. Is he trying to talk to you again? I said yes. My mouth was dry. Officers are close. Keep quiet. Through the blinds, headlights swept the living room walls, someone turning onto our street. The man outside turned his head toward it. His hood shifted just enough for me to see part of his face. Light skin, stubble, maybe late 20s. His mouth stopped moving. Then the sound of snow compressing. One step, two, and he disappeared from the window. I didn't move until the dispatcher said, "They're there now. Do you see red and blue lights?" The glow pulsed across the blinds. I nodded, then remembered she couldn't see me. "Yeah," I whispered. Two officers came to the door, one tall and calm, one smaller, younger. I led them to the room. The taller one pointed his flashlight at the window. "You open this tonight?" "No." He angled the light across the screen, then frowned. "That's a clean cut." The rectangle of screen, about the size of a book, had been sliced on all four sides. It still sat perfectly in place. You wouldn't notice unless you looked close. He used the tip of a pen to push it. It fell inward soundlessly. The edges were sharp, smooth, razor sharp. The other officer came in from outside holding a small plastic cap. "Found this in the mulch," he said. "Utility knife piece." They swept the yard. The snow had faint footprints leading to the window and looping back, like someone doubling their trail. No car tracks. No neighbors awake. They wrote the report. The whole thing took maybe 30 minutes. My parents got home halfway through, Mom panicking, Dad trying not to. The officer explained everything calmly. He told them to add a dowel to the sliding doors and move my desk away from the window. When they left, my dad pushed the couch against the window anyway. My mom made hot chocolate because that's what she does when she doesn't know what else to do. I just sat there, staring at the blinds, trying to replay what he'd been mouthing. It wasn't help me. It wasn't please. It was slower, almost conversational. "I can see you." That's the phrase my brain keeps landing on, even if I never actually heard it. The next day, I moved my desk to the opposite wall. Took half an hour. It felt stupid, like rearranging furniture could fix something, but it helped. Facing away from the glass made it easier to breathe. I tried gaming with my friends again. Couldn't focus. Every flicker in my peripheral made me twitch. Logan said, "You good, man?" I said, "Yeah." Then I logged off early. For months, I couldn't stop replaying that moment. The faint fog of his breath, the shape of his lips moving, the control in it. He wasn't trying to break in right away. He was testing how close he could get, how long he could hold eye contact without me calling for help. It wasn't about the house. It was about me. That realization sank deeper than I wanted. The cops never caught him. They called it a prowler case. Probably some guy testing locks. That's what they said. But locks don't explain the whisper lips, the perfect rectangle, the patience. The thing about fear is it doesn't end when the danger leaves. It just finds smaller ways to stay. Now, whenever I pass that window, I look away. My mom eventually moved the couch back, said the living room looked weird. I let her, but my desk stayed where it is, facing the wall. If you'd told me before that night how fear actually feels, I'd have said something about adrenaline or heart-racing nonsense. But that's not what it's like. It's quiet, methodical. It teaches you new rules about your own home, how to move, where to stand, when to breathe. I've thought about what would have happened if I'd leaned in, if I'd tried to listen. Maybe that's what he was waiting for. The split second when I'd move closer, and the latch would be within reach. So, I keep my distance from windows, from assumptions, from the idea that home automatically means safe. That night rewired me. And every time I see my reflection in the glass after dark, I think about that man kneeling in the cold, mouthing words I never heard, and how close I came to finding out what they were. Old houses talk. That's what I tell people when they visit and comment on the noises. Mine says hello on step 4 and complains on step 9. It's like a living metronome keeping rhythm with my nights. I'm a grad assistant at the university in Ann Arbor. Between grading freshman essays and paying rent that eats half my stipend, I've learned to love the quiet. My roommate, Matt, usually fills the place with noise. Music, calls, microwave beeps. But he was gone that weekend visiting his parents in Grand Rapids, leaving me alone with a drafty house, a pot of coffee, and 70 pages of unpolished student writing. The dining table was my grading station. Laptop, mug, highlighter, stack of essays, everything in its proper place. From where I sat, I could see the hallway and the start of the staircase, half lost in shadow. Step 4 had its distinct creak, low and round like a throat clearing. Step 9 was higher pitched, almost irritated. You could tell who was coming or going by how those steps sang. That night was cold enough that the windows filmed with frost. The thermostat sat at 65 to save money. Only thing keeping me company was the heater and the wood doing its little groan thing adjusting to temperature. A normal winter night in an old house. Until 1:13 a.m., the sound came from the hallway. One clean creak. Step 4. I didn't even look up at first. "Hey, Matt," I called out. "You back early?" Nothing. I waited for the follow-up, the complaint of step 9, the shuffle of shoes, maybe the sound of his duffel bag hitting the floor. Nothing came. The silence folded in tight again. The house cooled a little, or maybe I just noticed it more. I rubbed my wrist, listening. Houses settle, I told myself. Wood expands. Excuses expand too. I went back to the essay. The radiator hissed, the fridge clicked, all normal sounds. Then it happened again. The same creak. Step 4. Identical pitch, identical tone. You don't get the same note twice unless something stayed there. I set my pen down. The heater clicked off, and suddenly the silence felt louder. I listened for footsteps continuing or retreating. Nothing. The silence felt charged, like the house was waiting for me to respond. I picked up my phone and opened the voice memo app. It was half curiosity, half nerves. I hit record and set it on the table, letting it capture the room tone. If there was another sound, I'd have proof it wasn't imagination. 30 seconds went by. Then a minute. The house didn't breathe. Then I heard it. Super soft, like fabric sliding against wood, like someone shifting where they stood on the stairs. I stood slowly. I reached for the nearest thing that felt like a weapon, a pen. It's funny how small confidence becomes when the world shrinks to the edge of a doorway. The staircase waited in the dark. I could see the top half of the stairs, but not the risers. Step 4 was out of view. We keep a light switch at the bottom of the staircase. I stared at it, debating. If someone stood on that step, they'd see me reaching. Enough, I said to myself. I flipped the switch. The bulb flooded the stairs in light. No movement, no shadow. Just 12 old steps rising into the stillness. But light gives shape to fear. The brightness only confirmed what darkness hid. I was alone in the room, but not convinced that I'd been alone before. I stayed there for maybe 10 seconds, listening so hard my ears felt pressurized. Then I started climbing 1 foot at a time. Step 1, 2, 3, fine. Step 4 gave its usual creak under my weight, the exact same note. I took another few steps up, and halfway I felt a draft across my ankles. I reached the landing and turned toward the back hallway. From there, I had a clear line of sight to the kitchen and the back door. It was open 3 inches, held only by the small chain limiter we never bothered to remove. The door rocked in the cold. I didn't rush forward. I stood still, staring at the tiny wedge of black beyond the doorframe. My body acted before I could think it through. I walked back down the stairs, quiet as I could manage. At the bottom, I turned left into the kitchen. The air was noticeably colder there, enough that I could see my breath when I exhaled. The door swayed slightly against the chain. I reached for it, then stopped short. A faint smear of snow dust lay across the threshold, just enough to show where a boot might have turned before slipping away. I eased the door closed until the latch caught and the chain slackened. The house exhaled again, or maybe that was me. I called the non-emergency police line because 911 felt dramatic. What seems to be the issue? I think someone was inside, I said. Back doors open, and I heard something on the stairs. Any sign of forced entry? Not really, just something feels off. She told me to wait outside if I could, near a light. I grabbed my coat, pulled on boots without socks, and stepped onto the porch. A patrol car pulled up within 5 minutes. I walked the officer through what happened. Latch plate's been shaved, he said, crouching to show me. The screws around the strike plate were bright silver, freshly worked. This wasn't wear and tear. Someone's tried this door before. He shone the beam toward the fence that bordered the alley. Boards loose, he added, just enough for a foot to slip under. Snow's disturbed here, too. Kids? I offered, hoping for an easy answer. He didn't look up. Maybe, or someone testing houses. He scribbled in his notebook, then said, "Replace those screws, 3-inch ones this time, add a bar if you can, and put a chime on the door at night. It'll wake you." He made it sound like routine maintenance, but I could tell he didn't like what he saw. The second he was gone, it got weirdly quiet. Not chill, just too quiet. I walked the house again, noting where each floorboard complained, which steps sang sharper. I pressed on the back door and watched how far the latch seated before catching. Then I sat on step 4 and listened to the house breathe around me. I slept on the couch that night, with the light over the sink left on. No sudden jolts awake, no nightmares. Matt came back the next weekend. He laughed when I told him, then looked uneasy when I showed him the latch plate marks. We bought longer screws and installed a heavy door bar together. He tested the 4th step after and said, "House still says hi." We laughed. It didn't sound natural. People think the scariest part of a break-in is the idea of danger. It's not. It's the idea that someone stood inside your private silence and learned your routine from the inside. They knew which step talked first. They chose when to make it talk again. I don't know who they were or what they wanted. I only know the back door chain didn't hold, and that one board in the stairs still flexes under pressure. I still test it with my boots sometimes. If you ask me why I'm certain there really was someone there that night, I'd tell you this. Old houses are unpredictable, but they don't lie. They creak from temperature, they shift under pressure, but they don't repeat the same note twice in perfect unison. That's human weight. That's someone deciding whether to move or to wait. Finals week turns everyone into a zombie. I was surviving on iced coffee, energy bars, and blind hope. My apartment in Gainesville was small. Just a bed, desk, and a closet with a door that never quite shut right. Every time I looked up from my notes, that thin line of darkness between the door and frame seemed to stare back. It sounds stupid now, but that night, it really started to bother me. So before sitting down to study, I got up, pushed the door until it latched, and wedged one of my sneakers against it. Problem solved. By 1:47 a.m., I was half asleep over my laptop when I heard a click. I looked up. The closet door had bled open again. Just a sliver, maybe half an inch. I stared for a while, waiting for it to move more. It didn't. Still, something about that tiny gap felt wrong. I told myself it was the hinge, maybe air from the fan, but I still took a picture and sent it to my mom with a text that said, "Your paranoid daughter is losing it again." I closed it one more time, wedged the sneaker tighter, and went back to studying. At some point, I must have drifted off at my desk. When I opened my eyes again, it was 4:03 a.m. The room was dark except for one light, the closet. A soft, bluish glow pulsed from inside. My phone was right there on the desk. Whatever was glowing in there, it wasn't mine. The sneaker had been kicked aside. The door was wide open, and I could see faint outlines of my clothes swaying slightly, like air was moving from inside the closet outward. Then came a sound. It sounded like a fingernail tapping on plastic. Every muscle in my body locked. I didn't breathe, didn't move. I just stared into that glow, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The light shifted, dimmed, then brightened again, like someone adjusting a phone flashlight. I backed toward the bathroom, grabbed my phone, and slipped inside. The second I turned the lock, I called 911. I could barely get the words out. My voice was shaking, but the dispatcher stayed calm, asking me to stay quiet and describe what I'd seen. I told her about the light, the door, the sound. She told me to keep the door locked until the officers arrived. While I whispered into the phone, I heard movement. Soft footsteps crossing my carpet. They stopped right outside the bathroom. My hand was trembling so badly that the phone brushed against the tile. That tiny noise seemed deafening in the silence that followed. Then I heard the faintest sound, like someone exhaling through their nose. The dispatcher must have heard something in my tone, because she told me to stay on the line, that the officers were close. Within minutes, the stillness broke. I heard doors banging open, voices shouting "police," and heavy boots rushing down the hallway. When they reached my apartment, I unlocked the bathroom door. The officers swept the place fast, guns drawn. One of them opened the closet and immediately called for backup. The fire escape window was cracked open. There were muddy footprints on the sill, trailing down the wall outside. Inside the closet, under a hoodie I didn't recognize, was a cheap burner phone. The screen was still lit, its flashlight app running. One officer picked it up with gloves. "He used this to see," he said. "No SIM card." They checked the latch on the window. It was bent at an angle, screws loose. Whoever it was had pried it open just enough to slide in. They dusted for prints. Only partials. Smudged. Incomplete. That night, the officers stayed until sunrise, walking the perimeter and checking neighboring buildings. They didn't find anyone. When they left, they suggested I stay somewhere else for a few days. I packed a bag and went to my friend Rachel's place. A week later, I moved apartments. Top floor this time. No fire escape. New locks. Some nights, I'll wake up at random, completely still, not sure why. My eyes will drift toward the closet, waiting for that blue glow. But that's the thing. Once you've seen a door open on its own and realized someone else was behind it, you stop trusting quiet nights. You start sleeping lighter. and you never, ever leave the closet door cracked again. People always say breakups hurt because of silence. No more late night calls, no texts lighting up your phone. For me, silence was never the problem. The problem was realizing that silence doesn't always mean someone's gone. Her name was Danielle. We were together for 3 years. She was passionate, unpredictable, and had this way of making you feel like you were the center of her world. At first, I thought that intensity was love. But over time, it felt more like being watched than being wanted. When I finally ended it, she didn't cry or beg. She just said, "You'll feel me again before you forget me." I brushed it off as something dramatic people say when they're hurt. I blocked her number, boxed up her things, and tried to get my life back to normal. That winter, I was recovering from a small surgery and sleeping light because of the meds. My apartment in Denver was quiet, warm, and finally starting to feel like mine again. It was around 2:19 a.m. when I woke up to the mattress dipping near my knees. Not the casual kind of shift you get when you move your legs or roll over. This was pressure, like someone was sitting down carefully, trying not to wake me. I stayed perfectly still. The room was dark. I listened, waiting for the sound of the furnace or pipes, anything that could explain it. Instead, I heard breathing. It was soft and close enough that it moved the hair on my neck. For a few seconds, I convinced myself it was me. Maybe my CPAP machine had shifted, or maybe I was half dreaming. But the rhythm didn't match my own breath. It came between mine. I whispered, "Danielle?" Nothing. The air felt heavy. Then, just when I reached for the lamp chain, the breathing stopped, like whoever it was knew what I was about to do. I hesitated. Then I yanked it. The lamp flicked on, flooding the room with light. No one. The spot beside my legs was still indented, deep enough to hold its shape. And the strangest part? The sheets were warm. I pressed my hand into the dip. It felt like someone had just been there. That's when the smell hit me. Vanilla mixed with cigarette smoke. Danielle's perfume. She used to drown herself in it before bed, said it made her dreams sweet. I got out of bed fast, scanning the room. The door was shut, windows locked. Everything looked untouched. Still, I couldn't shake that scent. I checked the living room, the kitchen, even the hallway closet. Nothing. I told myself I was overreacting. Maybe it was memory, nerves, or leftover perfume on something she'd left behind. Then I went back to the bedroom and noticed the bathroom door. It was open about an inch. I'd closed it earlier that night. I stood there, phone in hand, staring at the black gap between the door and frame. I thought about walking away. Instead, I took one slow step forward and nudged the door. It creaked just a little, and from inside came the faintest sound, a single inhale. That was all it took. I slammed the door shut, twisted the lock on my bedroom handle, and dialed 911. I whispered everything to the dispatcher. My voice was shaking so badly, she had to ask me to repeat the address twice. She told me to stay locked in, keep quiet, and wait for the officers. While I was on the phone, I heard movement. They were still in the room. I pressed my back against the door, holding the phone so tight my hand hurt. I didn't move until I heard the distant wail of sirens. The footsteps stopped. A moment later, banging on the front door. "Police!" When I opened the door, the bathroom door was wide open. The officers swept the apartment, guns drawn. They didn't find anything at first. Then one of them checked the hall closet, the one I barely use, and called for backup. She was crouched there. Danielle. She was pale, her hair matted, wearing the same hoodie she'd taken when she left me. Her eyes looked glassy, unfocused, like she hadn't slept in days. She didn't scream or fight. She just looked at me and whispered, "You left the window unlocked." They took her out in handcuffs. When they searched her bag, they found a set of my house keys, the spare set I thought I'd lost months earlier. Later, they told me she'd been living nearby, sleeping in her car behind an old strip mall. She'd broken in 3 nights in a row, waiting until I was asleep before coming out from the closet or hallway. They think she was watching me. That night, I didn't sleep. Not after the police left. Not after the sun came up. I just sat at the kitchen table, staring at the window she mentioned. The latch was slightly bent. I moved out 2 weeks later. New apartment, new locks, top floor, no fire escape. But now I keep a chair propped under my doorknob at night. I sleep facing the door, and every time I wake up in the middle of the night, I listen. Not for creaks, not for wind, just for breathing. Because I know what it sounds like when someone who used to love you decides they can't let go. And the scariest part isn't the night she came back. It's knowing that for weeks before that, she was already there. Watching, waiting, breathing beside my bed. If these stories made you look twice at the shadows in your own home, you're officially part of the family. Smash that like button, subscribe so you never miss the next scare, and drop your own late night scare in the comments. I read every one. And if you think summer is all beaches and bonfires, this next one will change that. Click now to watch 4 of the scariest horror stories from last summer, because some memories don't burn away with the sun. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.